hello everyone. Hold on, I changed my view here. No, this is better. Hello everyone. Welcome back. I welcome today a very dear friend of mine, Paul Martin. I met him a couple of years ago in London, and since then we stayed in touch. Welcome. Hi, Paul. How are you?
Hello, Gudrun. It's actually been 4 or 5 years since we met.
We met. I was flyer distribution. And I think I asked you for a roll-up or something in my typical way to talk to people.
You hit me up for a smoke and we got talking.
Yeah, it was cool. And since then we're friends. See how life is?
That was near the Albert Hall, wasn't it? It was by a museum.
It was by the V&A and the National History Museum, yeah. In Kensington, yeah. I remember it was a sunny day.
I think it was near South Kensington Station, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd got off the station and I was walking to the park.
Yeah. I think we were going to do your frisbee thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Right, let's start. Let me ask you first question. What are you doing and why?
I'm just living my life. What else is there to do?
Yeah, but how do you live your life? Inspire people, because your story is very unique as well, you know?
Well, it's very complicated at the moment because I really don't want to go into the layers of complication because it's just too. But basically, the way I conceive of it is I live in Germany. Germany's home for me. My partner's in Germany, but I've taken a job in the UK, so in the vicinity of where I'm living in Warwickshire, and I work as a Microsoft Excel expert or specialist.
But you are more spiritual. I want to get out your spiritual, shamanic side. How do you live with it? What's your attitude towards life in that sense? How can people live easier? Because I feel very chilled. You know, you're like just floating through the world in a way, you know, you doesn't, like we said earlier, that the world doesn't really affect you. Let's put it this way. So how do you get to the point where you feel settled in yourself and really know what is what in the world and live your life accordingly? Like you said, living around whatever is going on. How can you get there? How did you get there where you at?
Well, gee, you know, I don't think so much in terms of spirituality these days. I think that's an escape for a lot of people. You know, people get into, I don't know, crystals, Reiki. I mean, I've been into crystals. I've been into Reiki. You know, the real life is not out there. You know, there's nothing. Everything's in me. My reality is grounded in this body. The only thing that's real for me is this body. That's all I have. And so for me, the spiritual life is really the practical life. It's doing what has to be done in order to, you know, each of us has a unique path through life, and each of us has to deal with whatever it is that we're confronted with. And so for me, the spiritual life is really the practical life. It's dealing practically with everything in my life and not avoiding the problems in my life. You know, everyone wants to be happy, but no one thinks in terms of rather than trying to be happy, actually looking intelligently at my situation and doing what has to be done to remove the unhappiness. So for me, everything that's a cause of unhappiness or a problem is a flag. You know, it's a flag to say, okay, this is requiring attention. And so for me, I'm just living my life. That's all. And I have whatever life skills or experience or training, and I have to do something in this world. You know, this world requires that I pay my rent, that I pay my bills, you know, maintain a car, so on and so forth. So you know, that's just the way the world is. I can complain about it, but it doesn't change anything. So I'm just doing my best. I did have an 8-year break from when I met you. I was in the middle of an 8-year break from working. Actually, I was towards the end of it because you know, when I came to the UK, you know, the cost of living here is so ridiculous. You know, it's just, especially rent and energy costs are just outrageous. So I had been living on savings for a number of years, but then out of necessity, I went back to my profession as in IT. And after that 8-year break, I found it was a very different person that went back to the work. And I find that I'm actually better at what I do. People appreciate what I do more. I work more collaboratively. Well, on a professional level, that's what I'm good at. It brings the money in, so that's what I do. It's part of living practically.
And do you have any, like, I think you meditate a lot. Are you still meditating? Do you use any special technique to keep you grounded? Or
Well, I kind of identify more with what Eckhart Tolle talks about in terms of presence. I mean, meditation's good. I've never really been one particularly for meditation. I'm just more, for me, meditation is just being present and slowing down and being mindful about everything that I do. I'm more mindful about my work. I'm more mindful when I go to, you know, I live close to some nature here. I've got just a couple of minutes away, there's a river and a lovely park. So, you know, my meditation really is walking through the park and feeding the squirrels and feeding the swans and the ducks.
and how do you keep yourself present, like in a really weird situation, for example, stressful situation? How can you bring yourself back to the now? How you do it?
Just stop thinking, just be present. And
Yeah.
the best way I can think of to being present in any moment is to listen. When I engage my senses, there's no scope for thinking. The mind can't think. If I listen, then I've totally disengaged the mind. Well, I've put the mind on hold, and it's at just listening and focusing on the breathing.
Mm-hmm.
That brings presence.
Yeah.
So, but each person's got to find their own triggers for that. That's what works for me, is just simply to focus on my breath and to listen to the sounds. And then there's no scope for thinking, and presence just is natural.
Beautiful. Now, this brings me to my next question. What was the worst moment, the darkest moment in your life, where you like proper broken down in your life, and how did you get out of it?
I've had various traumatic experiences, or you know, experiences that at the time I considered to be traumatic. But the most traumatic one was when I was nearly 32, and I came home one day and the house was empty. My wife and children were gone.
Wow.
And the next 6 months was the most traumatic time of my life. And there's something that snapped in me. You know, it triggered all kinds of childhood memories and issues that hadn't been dealt with. And I came to realize that everything up until that point was still all there, and then it needed to be dealt with. And so that lasted for about 6 months. And there were traumas that followed afterwards that on the surface would appear to be much more traumatic than that. But having worked through that 6 months of processing what had happened to me and why it had affected me so much, I grew so much from that no traumatic experience afterwards was able to impact me or traumatize me in the way that experience had.
And how did you get over the trauma? Any special technique or anything, or did you go to therapy, or how did you manage?
Well, you know, I mean, what I did then and what I would do now is different, you know, because I was at the start of my, you know, healing journey then. I'm not on a healing journey now. I'm just on a living life journey now. So what things did it, well, you know, for me at the time, I think the thing that really there was different books that I read at the time. For example, this seems to be a common thread for a lot of people. Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. So as an emotionally repressed individual, you know, coming out of the time and experience, you know, the times and the experiences that I had growing up at that time in the 60s and the 70s, you know, so it seemed to be a common path for people that were, you could say, awakening or waking up. And so that was making the connection between my thoughts, my emotions, and the dis-ease or illness that you know, a person suffers from. So Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. There are other books like Dan Millman's Way of the Peaceful Warrior. That was a very significant book for me around about, I don't know, it was about 1993, 1994. And what was the biggest surprise was that, have you read Way of the Peaceful Warrior?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Anyway, it was it was in its field, it was a very popular book at the time. What I didn't expect was that, well, some 16 to 18 years later, I would have a parallel experience to Dan Millman, but you haven't read the book, so it won't mean much to you.
No, by explaining, maybe other people haven't read it and they would want to know what it means, what's the content, the basic summary of it. So they can
Way of the
relate.
Peaceful Warrior was written by Dan Millman, who was an American Olympic athlete,
Okay.
and I think in the 60s. And he had a motorcycle accident that changed his life. It ended his career as an athlete, and he was recovering from his injuries, and met a man, an older man, who was pumping petrol in a petrol station in America, and but this man seemed to have very supernatural abilities, and he guided Dan. The book's written as fantasy, but it's based on his actual experiences. And having had what I consider to be a parallel experience to Dan Millman, I can completely understand why he wrote it as fantasy, because if I ever write about my experience, I'd have to write it as fantasy too, because basically magic is so subtle and nuanced that unless you're actually there in the moment, you don't necessarily see what is magic or a miracle. But I had a year, or I'd say it was just amazing, but I couldn't tell you anything literally, because you wouldn't get it. I'd have to put it into fantasy, like Dan Millman's book is. It's actually the book that introduced me to the concept of shamanism, and I think more specifically, look, it's been a long time. I haven't read it for 30 years, so I can't really remember. But I just remember it introduced me to the concept of shamanism, which also became more of a part of my life after 2010.
And are you still engaged in shamanism, or are you using the tools of shamanism on your daily, day-to-day journey?
Well, I'd say that I I live the way of the shaman, because I would describe the mentor that I met in 2010. I would describe him as someone. Well, shamans would consider him a shaman, and I've observed that. But shamanism is not putting on a Peruvian hat with a feather in it and wearing beads and spraying perfume water. That's not what shamanism is. I mean, shamanism is and tantra, for example, are basically the same thing. It's the way of spirit. It's the way of life. It's
The
living
way of life, yeah.
in the flow of life, and it's not anything to do with what psychedelic substances you consume, or
No,
what journeys you go on, or how you dress.
it's the way of life, yeah.
It's a way of it's a way of living, of experiencing life. It's a different operating system.
Being
So we've got
connected, I think it's like being connected to it all in your life. You know what I mean? I think our gay people are disconnected from nature to start with, just from nature, don't even get me to the start, but the human being as we are, when I used to live in London, I saw how people are just simply disconnected from,
yeah
I don't even have to go to nature to get square feet around them. And I think
yeah
with shamanism, you reconnect to what's actually here right now, in the now. You reconnect in the now.
well, shamanism is includes I mean integral to it is one's connection to nature,
Yeah,
because I'm also a child of nature,
yeah.
and so nature is also my nature, and so people are not living according to to the natural way. We have artificial, for over a century we've had artificial suns, and we're disconnected from the cycles of life.
Yeah.
So shamanism is a connection to the land, connection to the plants, and a connection to the people, and ultimately a connection to spirit, or life, or love. They're all the life, love. It's all a God. It's all the same.
All connected, yeah. Thank you. My last question would be, so imagine you die today, yeah? Your last day today, sorry. But what would be your final word, your final, yeah, your final word, your final advice? So you die, you sit on the sofa, you have your friends and your partner around, and you tell them your last word.
There's nothing to say. I don't die.
Okay, good.
I don't die.
I
There's
mean,
just
your body dies. So what
yeah,
would you
yeah.
like to leave for people to, yeah, not to be whatever?
The process of leaving this world is such that as the veils between worlds open and the person who's passing through it, there's nothing to say. It's all said through the eyes.
No.
There is nothing to say. There is no death.
Yeah.
I've had a near-death experience. I've actually had many encounters, close encounters with death, and I have no fear of death.
Yeah.
I had a motorcycle accident in 2009,
Yeah.
and I crossed over momentarily, and when I came back, I was a different person. I know that I don't die. Only my
You
body
want to
dies.
explain a bit more about it, about your experience? I'm sure people would love to hear. I'm curious now.
Haven't I told you? Haven't I told you about that?
No, I think I can't really get details, remember, but
Oh well, it was. I remember the date. I remember it vividly. It was my first day back at work after the Christmas break. This was in Melbourne in January 2009, and I was 100 meters from my workplace, from my destination, and I was riding my motorbike to work, 100 meters away from work, and a delivery van just changed lanes and just took me out. And this was in peak hour on a Monday, and I totally lost control of my motorcycle. I just saw myself heading towards these steel poles in the street, and I thought, oh, that's it, I'm gone. These poles, they're like you know, headstones for motorcyclists. I thought, that's it, I'm gone. And I was like, I was in a washing machine, you know. I couldn't really see anything, but what I've been able to piece together since then, because I was right in the center of the city, by one of the busiest, not far from one of the busiest railway stations, and so the bike hit the pole. I got thrown from the motorbike onto the footpath, and the motorcycle continued up the footpath, hit the brick wall, and then continued up the footpath and took out a pedestrian who was on his way to work. This was 8 o'clock in the morning, you know, on a Monday morning, in the CBD in the city. So there was a lot of people around. So anyway, I hit the ground, and I just totally let go. And I said, okay, oh, what, you know, I've been in this situation many times before, where I've been in situations where I thought, oh, what, I'm going to die, and I didn't. And I've had many such experiences, and each time there's kind of a disappointment, because each time there's a surrender. Okay, I'm going back to my creator, but back to source, or back home, however you want to conceive it. And then when each time when this has happened to me, and I realize, oh, I'm still here, there's actually a kind of disappointment, but on this particular occasion, I had a partial, you know, near-death experience. I don't really have any vivid recollection of what happened to me on the other side. It's as if it were psychic surgery was done to me, and I came back with an upgraded sense, and I just knew that I don't die. So it was more about internal changes more than you know. I don't know if you're familiar with Alita Morjani and her book. I can't remember what it's called, Dying to Live or something, Dying to Be Me. It's probably the best known book about near-death experience. So she had a very vivid experience on the other side. I don't have that, but I did see vivid color that I've never seen before.
Wow. Okay.
I went down a tunnel of pure bright pink.
Wow. Nice. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. That's for today. Thank you for your time. Keep inspiring people. Thank you, people. And I see you all next week. Thank you.
Ciao.